Let me start with a confession. When I was asked to speak about the unmasculine habit women find ridiculously hot, I had a moment of real panic, Becca, as I'm a therapist, not a dating coach. But then I realized it's exactly that tension between knowing who you are and wondering if other people find it irresistible. That's where the magic lies. There's this idea floating around that attraction is built on the surface. The clothes, the muscles, the paycheck, the posture. And yes, those things can catch someone's eye, but they rarely hold attention. The truth is that people are drawn in and stay drawn in by something much deeper, something less obvious. It's not about putting on a performance. It's about a way of being that feels steady, grounded, and quietly magnetic. What makes someone feel irresistible isn't about dominating a room or having the loudest laugh. It's about what you communicate without needing to impress. It's about the subtle message that says, I know who I am and am comfortable here. That's what equals emotional confidence. Though you didn't need to know the term to feel it when it's in front of you, you recognize it immediately. You lean in without even realizing you're doing it. Think of the last time you were around someone who didn't need to prove anything. They weren't pushing. They weren't posturing. They weren't trying to fill every silence. Instead, they were present. They were listening. They were steady, that feeling, that pull you experience are in them. That's what people often describe as ridiculously hot. Here's the paradox. So many people spend years trying to perfect external markers of attractiveness when in reality, what makes them magnetic is the relationship with themselves. And that can sound frustrating because it's not as simple as buying new shoes or memorizing a few lines. But it's also freeing because it means that you don't have to perform. You just have to practice being fully you without apology. Now, that sounds simple, but simple isn't the same as easy. Because let us stand in who you are, you have to face the parts of yourself that you've been told to hide. You have to resist pressure to only show strength in the traditional sense. Never vulnerable, never uncertain, never emotional. And yet, what draws people in is not the absence of vulnerability, but the integration of it. Confidence isn't pretending you don't have doubts. Confidence is being able to acknowledge those doubts without being swallowed by them. I once sat with a client who told me about a date she went on. The guy wasn't movie star handsome. He didn't drive a flashy car, and he wasn't trying to dominate the conversation. But when she asked her about something painful in her past, he didn't change the subject. Hadn't crack a joke to lighten the mood. Why masculinity is magnetic. He didn't offer quick fixes. He just looked at her, listened, and said, that must have been really hard. She said that in that moment, she felt more attracted to him than she had to anyone in years. Why? Because he was comfortable enough in his own skin to let her be in hers. That's emotional confidence, and it's the number on a masculine habit women consistently find magnetic, even if they don't use those words to describe it. They'll say things like, I feel safe around him, or he's just so grounded, or he really sees me. What they're picking on is the presence that comes from someone who ain't busy proving their worth. Others where people get it wrong. They hear confidence and they think arrogance. They think puffing up, taking up space, talking louder. That's not confidence. That's insecurity dressed in a costume. True confidence is quieter. It doesn't need to announce itself. It's more about listening than performing. It's more about steadiness than dominance. And yes, it can absolutely be playful, funny, flirtatious. But the foundation is I know who I am and I don't need to prove it every 5 minutes. Now, if you're wondering how to actually live this out, let me make it accessible because otherwise, this just sounds like philosophy. And philosophy doesn't help you when you're standing in front of someone you like. Your heart beating fast and you're not sure what to say. Emotional confidence in real life looks like this. It looks like telling the truth about what you feel even when your voice shakes a little. It looks like saying, I'd really like to see you again. instead of playing games or waiting 3 days because some article told you to. It looks like admitting I was nervous to tell you that instead of hiding behind silence. It looks like asking a real question and listening to the answer instead offlining your next line while the other person is still talking. It looks like not rushing to fill every silence with words. It looks like allowing space because you trust that connection doesn't need constant noise to survive. It looks like being able to laugh at yourself, not in a self-deprecating way that undermines you, but in a way that shows you don't take yourself too seriously. The kind of laugh that says, yeah, I spilled coffee on my shirt right before this date, and I'm just going to own it instead of pretending others. It looks like setting boundaries, but kindly saying, I'd love it to talk more, but I need to head out without apology or defensiveness. That balance of directness and kindness is incredibly attractive because it shows both self-respect and respect for the other person. And perhaps most importantly, it looks like consistency, showing up when you say you will, following through on what you promised, not vanishing when things get hard. That true reliability is underrated in a world obsessed with drama. But trust me, reliability is sexy because it communicates something very simple. You matter to me. When people talk about attraction, they often make it sound mysterious, as if there's a secret key you either know or don't. But attraction is random. It's responsive. People respond to how you make them feel. If they feel seen, safe, and free to be themselves, they're going to want to be around you. If they feel like they're in a performance where they have to applaud you constantly, they're going to get tired quickly. This is why I always emphasize you don't need to be extraordinary. You need to be present. The psychology of attraction, that's the magic. Most people are too busy rehearsing in their heads, worrying about being impressive or comparing themselves to others to actually show up in the moment. And the rare person who does show up fully, that's the one who stands out. I think sometimes people worry that if they let go of that performance, they'll be boring. But the opposite is true. Performance is exhausting. Authentic presence is captivating because it's rare. It's refreshing. And it allows connection to flow naturally instead of being forced. Let me tell you something that often surprises people. Attraction deepens in the quiet moments, not during the highlight reels, but in the in-betweens, walking side by side, sitting in comfortable silence, sharing a look when something small and funny happens. Those are the moments when you feel the depth of someone's presence, and that's what lingers long after the date ends. So yes, you can read endless articles about top habits and tricks to be more attractive, but if you want to cut through all of that, remember this. What's most irresistible isn't a move. It's a mindset. It's a habit of being grounded in yourself so that others can relax in your presence. And here's the best part. When you practice this, it's not only good for your dating life, it's good for your life, period. Because emotional confidence doesn't just make you more attractive. It makes you a better partner, a better friend, a better colleague, a better human. It makes your connections deeper, your conversations richer, your relationships sturdy. That's why it's worth practicing. Not because it's a trick towing someone over, but because it makes you more whole. And when you're whole, people feel it. They want to be near it. They trust it. So the next time you'll catch yourself wondering what you need to do to impress someone, pause, take a breath. Remind yourself the most magnetic thing you can offer isn't perfection, isn't performance, it's presence. That's the habit that's ridiculous hot, and it's available to anyone who's willing to practice showing up fully as themselves. And maybe that is most attractive thing of all. There's something fascinating about the way we talk about attraction. We make it sound like a science experiment. Add 3 parts charm, 2 parts confidence, sprinkle in some good looks, shake well, and voila, irresistible. But attraction doesn't work like that. People aren't recipes. And what's funny is that often things that really spark connection are the things nobody told us were supposed to matter. I'll give you an example. I once had a client tell me that the moment she fell for her new husband wasn't when he showed up with flowers or when he leaned in with some clever line. It was when he spilled soup all over his shirt on their first date, looked down, laughed at himself, and said, "Well, I was hoping to make an impression, just not like this." She told me she couldn't stop smiling in that moment. He wasn't trying to be perfect. He wasn't hiding his clumsiness. He just let himself be human, and that made him magnetic. See, that's what we often miss. We think we have top it on this polished version of ourselves, the one with the carefully chosen words and the confident gestures, but what makes someone feel drawn to you? One habit revealed isn't the perfect performance. It's the mix of heart and humor. It's showing that you care deeply, but also that you didn't take yourself so seriously. You can laugh when life gets messy, because here's the truth. Life is always a little messy. We forget names. We trip on sidewalks. We say the wrong thing, and if you can hold those moments with lightness instead of panic, it communicates something very powerful. It says, "I am not afraid of imperfection," and that is incredibly attractive. Now let's talk about heart. Heart isn't about grand declarations or dramatic gestures. It's about sincerity. It's about letting people see that you actually feel things, that you're not about delivering lines you memorize from some dating manual. When you combine heart with humor, you create a space where people feel both cared for and comfortable. They know you represent with them, and they also know they can exhale. Think about it. When was the last time you really felt connected to someone? Chances are it wasn't when they gave you a flawless speech. It was when they were being real, when they showed you both their warmth and their humanity, the laugh that escapes when they least expect it, the tenderness in their eyes when you tell a story that matters to you. That is kind of connection that sticks. What's interesting is that a lot of people believe they need to choose the funny one or the serious one, the strong one or the sensitive one. But the magic actually happens when you allow both. When you can show strength and sensitivity, humor and sincerity, playfulness and depth, that's the combination people can't resist because it feels whole. It feels alive. Let me give you another story. Woman told me once about a guy she was seeing. They were having dinner and the waiter brought the wrong dish. Instead of making a scene or trying to look unfazed, he laughed and said, "Well, I was apparently meant to have salmon tonight. Maybe the universe knows I need more omega-3 south." He didn't try to act superior. He didn't act annoyed. He just found humor in the moment. And later, when she asked him about something painful from his past, he didn't deflect with jokes. He shared openly. She said that the combination of being able to laugh easily and also speak honestly was what made her fall for him. This is the kind of balance that creates attraction, the willingness to show your heart paired with the ability to hold things lightly. If you lean too far into heart without humor, it can feel heavy, overwhelming. If you lean too far into humor without heart, it can feel shallow, evasive. But when you bring them together, you create something that feels safe and alive at the same time. It's not about trying to be funny either. Forced humor doesn't work. What can all sense when someone is trying too hard to land a joke? What works is simply noticing the funny and the ordinary, the small moments, the imperfections, and being willing to laugh at yourself. That's not weakness, it's strength, because it shows you don't need to protect your ego every second. And here's the secret nobody tells you. That kind of self-acceptance is ridiculously attractive, because if you how women subconsciously test minkin, laugh at yourself, it tells the other person you won't judge them harshly for being human either. It creates freedom. It creates trust. Now, some people might hear this and think, well, that's just my personality. I'm not naturally funny. But this isn't about being a comedian. This isn't about delivering punchlines. It's about being present enough to notice the humor in life and brave. Enough to let people see your real reactions. Sometimes that's a laugh. Sometimes it's a warm smile. Sometimes it's saying, okay, that was awkward. Let's rewind. That's funny. Not because it's a joke, but because it's honest. Heart and humor together also shift how we handle conflict. Instead of turning disagreements into battles, humor can diffuse the tension and heart can keep the connection intact. Imagine someone saying, we don't agree on this, but at least we both agree that pineapple on pizza is still a crime. That little mint of levity softens the edges while the heart ensures the conversation still feels meaningful. People often underestimate just how much attraction leaves in the small moments. Sure, grand gestures are nice, but they're not what sustains connection. What sustains it, Terry, those little signals? Your ability to listen, your willingness to laugh, your openness to share. Those are the habits that make someone think, I want to keep this person around. When we blend heart with humor, we're essentially saying, I care, but I'm also relaxed. I'm invested, but I'm not clinging. I'm here fully, and I can hold both the serious and the silly. That duality is what makes people lean in closer. Not because you dazzled them, but because you made them feel both safe and alive. I remember someone once say to me, the sexiest thing isn't when Eamon tries to be perfect. It's when he's present. And presence means all of it, your warmth, your laughter, your flaws, your stories. Not hiding behind armor, not hiding behind sarcasm, but blending the parts of you that are tender with the parts of you that are playful. So if you're looking for a so-called habit opus, practice this. Notice the humanity in every moment. Notice when things don't go as planned and instead of tightening up, loosen. Notice when Simeon shares something tender and instead of deflecting, lean in. Notice when you make a mistake and instead of covering it up, smile. Because what really pulls people toward you is enough absence of mistakes. It's the ability to hold mistakes with lightness and sincerity. That's what makes you memorable. That's what makes you magnetic. And maybe this is the biggest point. Blending heart with humor isn't just attractive. It's sustainable. Anyone can put on a performance for a while, but eventually the act gets tiring. What keeps someone leaning toward you day after day isn't perfection. It's your ability to be real, to care deeply, to laugh easily, and to navigate the messy, unpredictable reality of life with both warmth and wit. That's not a trick. It's not a gimmick. It's a way of being. And on SEO, practice it. You realize it's not just about making someone else like you. It's about liking yourself enough to let your full self show. That's what's truly irresistible. Whenever I hear people ask about attraction, I notice how often they want quick fixes. They want the 5 practical ways to show this habit 3 magic lines. The 10 best strategies, the do this, don't do that lists. It's almost like they're looking for a cheat sheet to human connection, and I get it. We all want certainty, especially in dating. But the truth is, the things that make us fall for someone don't usually come from a list. They come from the messy, unpredictable, beautifully ordinary stories of our lives. When I think back to the times people have described the moments they felt most drawn to someone, the details say are rarely slick. Nobody says it was when he followed rule number 4 in the dating guide. What they say instead is something like, it was the way he looked at me when I started talking about my mom. Or it was when she laughed at my stupid joke. Not because it was funny, but because she could tell I was nervous and she wanted me to feel at ease. These are the moments that stick. Because they're real. They're not rehearsed. They don't come out of a manual. They come from showing up fully in all your humanness. And that's what's actually irresistible. Let me tell you a story. A woman once told me that she was on a date with a man who seemed like he was doing everything right. He had the right clothes. He said the right things. He seemed to know all the moves. But she said she felt nothing. And then at the end of the evening, when he thought she'd already left, she watched him trip over the curb and laugh at himself, and she said, "That was the first moment I felt like I actually saw him." Isn't that interesting? After a whole night awfulish, the only thing that felt real was the stumble. We underestimate how much people want to see the real us, not the carefully edited version. We think we're impressing someone by buying flawless, but what really draws them in is the small, unscripted story that slips through when we're not trying so hard. The story that says, "I'm human and I trust you enough to let you see that." Another client once told me she fell in love when the man she was dating got married. I was so nervous to ask you out that I almost didn't do it. It wasn't confident in the movie star sense, but it was deeply attractive in case it was vulnerable, and it was true. That admission wasn't a line. It was a story of his actual experience, and it made her feel special. That's what I meant when I say real. Stories are more powerful than slick slogans. Slogans are generic. They could be said to anyone, but stories are personal. They're unrepeatable, and they make the other person feel like you're inviting them into your world instead of just handing them a script. Think about your own life. The moments you remember most vividly aren't the ones where someone impressed you with their polish. They're F1s where you shared a laugh that wasn't planned, or you revealed something you didn't intend to but felt safe in it to let slip. That's where a connection takes root. And that's why attraction isn't really about informing. It's about being willing to share, not overshare, not unload everything all at once, but letting people in little in ways that feel real. For example, instead of offering to sound interesting by talking about all your accomplishments, tell a story about how you once got lost on the way to your own job interview and ended up asking for directions from a stranger who then became a close friend. That story says so much more than a list of achievements ever could. It shows humor, vulnerability, adaptability, humanity. When you share a real story, you're giving the other person something to connect with. And in turn, you're also inviting their stories. That's how intimacy grows. Not in rehearsed lines, but in back and forth exchanges where both people reveal little pieces of themselves. One of my favorite things is when people realize that the thing they thought made them less attractive is often the thing that ends up drawing someone in. A man once told me he felt embarrassed about being shy, but then had told me how on a date he admitted, "I get quiet sometimes. Not because I'm bored, but because I feel so much in my head." And the woman across from him said, "That's funny. I do the same thing." That real admission sparked a connection because it wasn't slick. It was shared humanity. We live in a difference between arrogance and strength, culture that sells us the idea that being attractive is about standing out, being larger than life. But what most people want isn't perfection, it's presence. They want to feel like you're actually there with them, not running a script in your head about what you should say next. They want your stories, not your slogans. And that requires courage because telling a story means revealing something about yourself. It means stepping into vulnerability. But that's exactly why it's so magnetic. When you share something real, you're saying, "I trust you with this piece of." And that trust creates closeness. I've heard countless stories of people saying, "I didn't fall in love with the grand gesture. I fell in love with the variety moment." Someone making them tea when they were sick. Someone bearing a detail they mentioned weeks ago. Someone admitting they were scared. These are small, real moments, but they're the ones that make us feel seen. And isn't that what attraction really is? It's less about being dazzled and more about being seen, by known, about feeling like your story matters to someone else. So the next time you feel the pressure to impress, pause. Instead of thinking, "What should I say that sounds good?" Ask what's true for me right now. Maybe it's I'm nervous Beckos. I really wanted tonight to go well. Maybe it's this reminds me of Astri from when I was a kid. Maybe it's a don't know the answer to that, but I'd love to hear your take. These aren't lines. They're windows into who you are. And that's infinitely more attractive. Real stories make connection possible because they're the opposite of performance. They don't try to manipulate. They don't try to impress. They just invite someone closer. And when someone feels invited into your real world, that's when attraction deepens. What people really want is not a flawless character. They want a human being. They want the story that explains how you got here, what shaped you, what makes you laugh, what makes you cry. That's the kind of thing that creates a spark that lasts. So let's leave the slogans behind. Let's stop memorizing lines and start telling the stories, the real ones, the funny ones, the imperfect ones, because that's where intimacy is built. That's where attraction becomes more than surface level. And that's where someone gets to fall, not just for an image of you, but for the truth of you. One of the most common traps people fall into when it comes to attraction is the belief that they need to be perfect. Perfect timing, perfect words, perfect confidence, perfect body, perfect life, and it makes sense. We live in a culture that tells us to polish, to edit, to upgrade yourselves constantly. We're fed this idea that people will love us more if we can present the flawless version of ourselves. But here's the twist. Perfection isn't attractive. In fact, it's intimidating, exhausting, and often feels fake. What's actually magnetic is growth. The willingness to evolve, to stumble, to learn, to try again. People aren't drawn to perfection. They're drawn to someone who's alive, in motion, curious. Becoming. Think about the people who have stayed in your mind. The ones you found compelling. Were they fians who had it all figured out, never made mistakes, never admitted doubt? Or were they the ones who could say, I didn't know, or I'm working on that, or I used to think one way and now I've changed? My mind. Growth is human. Perfection is a performance. And the truth is, nobody wants to feel like they are dating a performance. I remember talking to a woman who said the moment she really fell for her partner wasn't when he was at his best, but when he was frustrated about something and admitted, I'm not great at this, but I'm trying. She said she felt more connected to him in that moment than in all the polished months before, because in that vulnerability, she saw his heart. She saw his effort, and that meant more than some polished version of success ever cowled. It's funny. People worry that showing their flaws will make them less attractive, but it's often the opposite. When you share your process instead of when this habit creates obsession, just your results, people feel closer to you. They get to be part of your story, and that's far more compelling than the illusion of having it all together. Wesometimes confuse confidence with perfection, but real confidence is actually the opposite. Real confidence is being able to admit when you're wrong, when you're scared, when you didn't know, without crumbling. It's being secure enough in who you are to not need to project invincibility. That's not weakness. That's strength. One man once told me that he used to think women wanted him to always be decisive, always sure. But then he noticed that when he admitted unsteady, when he said, I don't have all the answers, but I want to figure it out together, it actually drew people closer. It created intimacy because instead of performing perfection, he was inviting partnership. That's what growth really is. It's an invitation. It says, I'm not finished. I'm learning. I'm willing to expand. And when you're with someone who approaches life that way, it feels hopeful. It feels alive. It feels like the story isn't stuck. It's still being written, and who doesn't want to be part of that? Perfection, on the other hand, feels like a wall. There's no entry point, no place to connect. If you present yourself as flawless, where it is the other person fit, What role do they get to play? But if you're growing, if you're unfolding, then they get to be part of the journey. They get to see us stretch. And in turn, they feel permission to stretch too. We sometimes think attraction is about impressing zone, but the truth is it's about inspiring them. And what inspires people isn't your perfection, it's your growth. Watching someone lean into their challenges, seeing them stay curious, feeling their willingness to evolve, that's what makes people want to lean closer. I remember another story. A client told me about a man she dated who seemed almost too perfect on paper. Great job, great looks, charming, polished. But she said what finally made her feel something real was when Heckenfest. I've always struggled with feeling good enough, and I'm working on being kinder to myself. That was the first moment she felt his humanity. Happiness wasn't weakness. It was courage. And it was that courage that made her want to know him more deeply. We're often so afraid of showing where we're still learning because we think it will make people pull away. Ironically, it's often what makes them lean in because it gives them permission to be imperfect too. And that's the foundation of intimacy. Two imperfect people willing to grow together. There's a quiet power in saying, I'm not final piece to embodying. Attraction perfect, but I'm present. That sentence alone can change the dynamic of a relationship because it removes the pressure of performance and replaces it with honesty. And honesty paired with effort is magnetic. The people who become unforgettable aren't the ones who had all the right lines. They're the ones who let you in on their journey. The ones who admitted mistakes, who lauded their missteps, who showed you not just the highlight reel, but the process behind it. That's what builds connection. That's what makes attraction sustainable. And let's be honest, perfection is boring. There's nothing to hold on to, nothing to relate to. But growth is endlessly engaging. Watching someone wrestle with themselves, navigate challenges, celebrate small wins, that's real. That's alive. And that's where intimacy takes root. I think we forget that relationships aren't about admiring each other from a distance, like statues. In a museum, they're about walking alongside each other as works in progress. They're about saying, I see where you are and may want to be here as you keep going. That's so much richer than pretending to be complete. So if you find yourself obsessing over being perfect, pause. Ask instead, where am I growing? What am I learning? How am I showing up even when I'm messy? Because that's where the real magnetism lies. It's not in never making mistakes. It's in how you respond to them. It's not in having all the answers. It's in being willing to ask the questions. It's not in projecting certainty. It's in letting someone see your uncertainty and still standing tall in it. That's what people remember. That's what they find deeply attractive, not the performance of perfection, but practice of growth. So let go of the pressure to be flawless. Show your humanity. Share your process. Invite people into your becoming because the truth is nobody falls in love with perfection. They fall in love with mastery. And the most beautiful stories are always still unfolding. So harass the heart of it. And this might feel too subtle for clickbait, but stick with me. You don't have to be a hero. You don't pave to dazzle. The real magnetism lies in being present with your emotional life and yours and hers without needing validation for it. In a world flooded with bravado, you get bonus points for being emotionally intelligent and secure. And that, my friends, is ridiculously hot. Thank you for letting talk about attraction without pretending it's all muscles and headlines. It's messy, human, and exactly why connection matters.